We are recording and we are live.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Good evening, everyone. This is Rob Ciampetti, Chairman of the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals. I want to welcome everyone who's logging on and take a few moments while we allow participants to log on and get themselves settled via Zoom. I'm going to take a moment as we do that, and we will in just a minute or two we'll kick things off. We will call the roll of our members of the ZBA, establish a quorum, and then what I like to typically do is walk everyone through a lay of the land on how these meetings work. And then without further delay, we'll get right into the public hearings. We do have a couple of matters that are going to be, that have been by the applicant requested. There's been a request to continue. So we usually take those first so that the applicant and anyone who might be in attendance has the opportunity to, to not sit around online waiting for an application that has that's going to be continued. So we will jump right into that. I'm looking now, and it looks like we've got 7:02. We have about 17 attendees and 7 panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started. For those of you who've just logged on, welcome. This is the Newburyport, City of Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals for the meeting of July 27th, 2021. We have a published start time of 7 p.m. as per our public notice. My name is Rob Ciampetti. I'm the chairman of the ZBA, and I would like to take a moment and just introduce by way of a roll call each of our members. I'll introduce the other panelists, and then I will take a moment and give everyone a quick description of how these hearings will proceed. For those of you that haven't attended a Zoom version of Zoning Board or any city commission or board hearing, I'll just walk us through quickly how we go about our business here at ZBA, and then we'll get right into the business of our agenda this evening. So with that, I'm going to call the roll. We'll establish a quorum and we'll continue from there. So calling the roll, please respond, members of the ZBA, with either aye or with either here or present. Mark Moore.
Here.
And Mark Moore is our vice chairman. Our secretary, Stephen Delisle. Stephen, if you can just unmute your mic.
I am here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Mr. Delisle. Mr. Ken Swanton.
I'm here too.
Thank you, Mr. Swanton. And member Walter Channon. Walter Bud Channon is actually absent this evening, so he's not in attendance. And associate member Gregory Bennett.
Present.
And so for purposes of this evening, in the absence of a voting member, Mr. Channon, our associate member, Mr. Bennett, will be promoted to voting member. So our voting members this evening on all applications except for 2 Neptune and 20 Atwood Street will be myself, Rob Ciampetti, Mark Moore, our vice chairman, Stephen Delisle, our secretary, Ken Swanton, member, and Mr. Gregory Bennett. So those will be our 5 voting members. So ladies and gentlemen, and those in attendance, I want to take another moment and just introduce the other panelists this evening. We also have in attendance our planning director, Mr. Andy Port, and we also have our keeper of the records, Ms. Gretchen Joy. And when it comes time for the public comment, I'll remind everyone that it's important to give your name and your address so that Ms. Joy can record your comments in our record. So without further delay, I can establish that we have a quorum so we can proceed with our public hearings. Just for those that haven't done this before, I'm going to take a moment and just walk everyone through what I like to describe as the lay of the land so that you're familiar with the flow and the process and the segments of a typical zoning board of appeals hearing. So with each hearing, we follow an adapted and sort of slightly relaxed version of Robert's Rules of Order. And in doing so, we start by opening each public hearing by reading it in sequence through the agenda. I will begin by reading what's called the legal notice. I'll describe the legal notice by description, applicant name, address, and docket number, and as well as a brief description of what the applicant's seeking in the application, whether it's an appeal, whether it's a dimensional variance, a special permit, etc. And then just a brief descriptor of what the applicant's seeking to do so that those in attendance can identify which application they're here to participate in, or just so that they know how to follow along and can keep track. So once I read the public notice, I'll give the floor to the applicant or the applicant's representative to present the application to the board. And Essentially, they'll present the application as well as present anyone that may wish to speak along with them as part of that application. That tends to be architects, engineers, attorneys, as well as the applicant themselves. Once they are concluded in that, I will close that portion of the public hearing. We'll then go to the public comment section. The public comment section of the public hearings here at the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals is when any member of the public can simply, by clicking the bottom right of your Zoom screen, the raise hand icon, if you click that, we will see it. And then Mr. Port, our planning director, will unmute your mic. We'll ask you to also unmute your mic on your end, which is the bottom left microphone icon. And then just simply give your name. I'll recognize you by name, or if you're calling in by telephone number, I'll do my best to identify the last 4 digits of the phone number that you're calling in from. And we will unmute your mic and invite you to speak your mind. Feel free to give your comments without any obligation or any sense of obligation to say you're pro or con. You're welcome to, but you're not obligated to fall into one of those columns. You don't have to speak in the pro column if you're for it, or in the against column if you're not. Just simply share your thoughts with us. Any questions, any comments, please give your name and address at the outset. And most importantly, in the interest and out of respect of the flow of the meeting and others that may wish to speak, we ask that every member of the public in speaking to kindly govern yourselves to keep your comments under 2 minutes or so. I do have some discretion, and I routinely will exercise it. We're not going to sever you at the knees at 2 minutes exactly, but do keep in mind that that we watch the clock fairly closely, and we do adhere to that with some rigor. So we'll ask you to govern yourselves accordingly. As soon as you finished your comment, keep in mind that if you have questions, you may feel free to pose those questions, but we ask you to be sure to understand that you won't be getting an answer or a response, at least not in this segment. What happens is the questions that we receive in the form of public comments are heard by and taken into consideration by each of the members of the ZBA. So you may hear a reiterated version of your question that you may have posed by one of the members of the ZBA during the next segment of the zoning board, which is the questions from the board. Once we finish public comment, I will close that segment and we'll go into questions from the board. And this is when members of the public, if you have a question that you pose, don't feel as though you've been overlooked. We are listening very carefully. We are oftentimes have the same questions or might express some version of that question to the applicant or the applicant's representatives. But rest assured that even though you pose a question that isn't answered in that segment, that it's part of the process, and we make sure to give it its due note. Once we go through questions of each member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, we will then close that portion of the public hearing and we go into deliberations. Deliberations is the segment of the hearing process during which you as members of the attending audience get to listen to the ZBA members basically discuss the matter and think out loud. So any of the the legal criteria that must be met, you'll hear us talk about to toil over and discuss whether we feel the applicant has met that criteria. If we have additional questions, this would be the time that members may ask me as the chair to permit them to ask additional follow-up questions. And so we do have some fluidity in that. It's all in the spirit of full disclosure and really just sort of vetting the merits of every application. So the rigor of Robert's rules takes second seat to the spirit of making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard, and we have a fully discussed process. Once we finish with deliberations, we'll close that portion of the public hearing. And this is when I invite a motion from a member of the ZBA. And again, in the spirit of an adapted Robert's Rules of Order, I will invite a motion to approve from a member of the ZBA. Keep in mind, that does not mean that that member of the ZBA plans to approve or vote to approve that application. It's simply the mechanics by which that matter is advanced onto the table for a vote. So it's always done in the affirmative. So it will be a motion to approve, which then must be seconded. Once the motion is made and seconded, I will then go through the roll and call for a vote. And each member of the ZBA will vote either yay or nay or yes or no. And in order for the application to be successful, 4 members of the Zoning Board of Appeals must vote in the affirmative. So that means that you must have at least a 4 yes vote in order to prevail. So with that in mind, I will then now move on to the actual public hearings. And since we've established our roll call, we've established our quorum as well as our voting members, I'm going to start with the 2 matters that are on our agenda that are being continued. The first of which is the application of 1721 State Street Caswell Restaurant Group, care of Lisa Mead, Tallerman and Costa, LLC. This is an appeal, docket 2021-18. It's an appeal of the zoning determination that the property is subject to the Downtown Overlay District. This is more of a technical placeholder that has been requested by the applicant to be continued to the hearing date of October 12th. Attorney Mead, do you wish to be heard, or do you wish us to just take a vote on the request?
You can just take a vote. Thank you very much for asking.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Okay, so members of the ZBA, with that, we have a request of the applicant to continue to the hearing of October 12th. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue application 2021-18 on 1721 State Street to October 12th of this year.
All right, motion's made by Mr. Moore. Do we have a second?
Second that, Greg Bennick here.
Thank you, Mr. Bennick. Motion's made by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Bennick. Calling the roll on the motion to continue. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Delisle?
Yes.
Mr. Swanton?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Bennick?
Yes.
And Rob Ciampetti, I vote yes. That's 4 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries and the matter is continued to the hearing of October 12th. The next matter, which is at the very end of our agenda, we've received a request from the applicant's representative on the matter of 2224 Olive Street, LLC, to continue that application to the hearing of September 14th. This is the application by the applicant's representative is attorney Lisa Mead, Tellerman and Costa. 2021-44, a special permit for nonconformities. Attorney Mead, may I assume that you wish to just have the board undertake a vote, or do you wish to be heard?
We're still in front of the Historic Commission, so we'd like to continue it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Mead. Okay, members of the ZBA, with that in mind, do we have a motion on the applicant's request to continue to September 14th?
Mark Moore here. I'll make a motion to continue application 2021-44 on 2224 Olive Street to the September 14th meeting of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And do we have
I'll second that motion.
Motion's made by Mr. Moore and seconded by Mr. Bennick. Thank you. Calling the roll on the applicant's request to continue to the application to the date of 9/14. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Delisle?
Yes.
Mr. Swanton?
Yes.
Mr. Bennick?
Yes.
Rob Ciampetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The matter is continued to September 14th. Thank you very much for that. So now we are at the first application that is on our public hearings. I need to note for members for both the applicants as well as for members of the public, the next 2 matters on our agenda is the matter of 2 Neptune Street by Patty Ann Bampos, and I believe Ms. Bampos will be representing herself with that application, as well as 20 Atwood Street. On both matters, I'm going to, because I was absent for previous hearings, I'm not qualified to vote on this, so I have to step back and sit this one out, and I'll be turning over the chair to our Vice Chair, Mr. Moore, to carry through both of those applications. But in the absence of one of our voting members, Mr. Shannon, my inability to vote means that we are rendered to what is called a minimum board. That's a board we only have 4 voting members. And if you recall from my intro, you have to have at least, as an applicant, 4 votes in the affirmative in order to be successful on your application and to have it approved. So before we get started, I want to make sure that the applicants or the applicant's representatives on both of those applications, and we'll start with 2 Neptune Street, are aware of this. And I will ask each of you whether you wish to proceed, in which case we'll certainly proceed. I'll turn over the gavel, the virtual gavel, to Mr. Moore, and he'll proceed, knowing full well that you'll need a unanimous vote in order to be successful. You may also, in the alternative, request a continuance to another hearing during which you'll have a more full board. So with that in mind, I will first go to Ms. Bampos. Ms. Bampos, if you can unmute your mic, and Andy, if you can unmute that microphone on 2 Neptune Street. Do you have a preference on how you wish to proceed?
So I guess I've never been in this situation before. So there are only 3 people available to vote. Is that correct?
Actually, there are only 4 people available to vote. which is a minimum board. So that means that all of the 4 voting members must all vote in the affirmative in order for your application to succeed. So that when there's a minimum board like that, we always extend the courtesy to every applicant to take a pause and a step back and await a more full board. So my ineligibility to vote, coupled with the absence of 1 voting member, Mr. Shannon, renders us down to a 4 voting member board.
And how many members are there typically? Are there 7?
There are, we have 6 voting, we have 6 members of the ZBA.
Okay, then I would like to ask for a continuance.
Very good. Do you have any, are you looking for the next available, I imagine?
Yes, please.
Okay. Andy, what's our next available meeting when we could accommodate Ms. Bampos in a continuance?
Sorry, August 10th would be the next date.
Okay. Ms. Bampos, does August 10th, is that acceptable?
That is wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. With your permission, Ms. Bampos, I will just elicit a quick vote and we'll move things along and get you that date. Is that okay?
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. So members of the ZBA, on the request of the applicant on 2 Neptune Street, we have, what was the date again? August
10th.
August 10th.
August 10th. Thank you. We have a request of the applicant to continue 2 Neptune Street to August 10th. I will, do we have a motion and a second?
So moved, Mr. Moore.
I'll second that, Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Motion's made by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Delisle. Calling the roll. Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries and the matter is continued to August 10th. And apologies, Ms. Bampos, and thank you for your patience and courtesy.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on now to the second matter that I have to step back on. This is the matter of Alexander and Mary Bruce Ray Grant, care of Lisa Mead, Tellerman and Costa, 20 Atwood Street. There's 2 applications, dimensional variance and a special permit for nonconformities. Attorney Mead, do you have a preference on behalf of your client?
Yes, thank you. We'd like a continuance to the August 10th meeting for both matters, please.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Mead. Andy, do we have, what do we have on the August 10th meeting thus far?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at that right now. Just want to make sure that the board doesn't have a midnight meeting. Yeah, you would have 5 with the one you just continued. You would have, actually, there's 3 hearings that night right now, so you've got room.
Okay. Do we have a motion from the ZBA to continue 20 Atwood Street, both applications to August 10th?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. This is Mr. Delisle. Motion to continue the variance application for 20 Atwood Street, application number 2021-37 to the meeting of August 10th, 2021. And
okay.
Separately.
All right. We can take them together. So
Okay.
does your
so I'll make the motion to continue the variance and the special permit application, both. That's application number 2021-38, both to the meeting of August 10th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle. So the motion's been made to continue both dimensional variance 2021-37 and 2021-38 special permit to the meeting of August 10th. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Motion's made by Mr. Delisle, seconded by Mr. Moore. Calling the roll. Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and both applications are continued to August 10th. Thank you for that, and thank you, Attorney Mead.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now moving on to the first full application that we will have before us this evening. I'll read the public notice, and we'll get into the merits. This is the application of MFG Ventures LLC for the property of 10 Briggs Avenue, docket 2021-42. This is a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant seeks to construct a new home partially on an existing footprint, causing an upward extension of a pre-existing non-conforming front yard setback. The applicants are Brandon Monaco and I believe Christopher Ferrant. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Good evening. This is Braden Monaco, one of the managing partners for MFG Ventures. Hope you're all doing well this evening. Our goal is to obviously move forward with this project here on 10 Briggs Ave. We are again looking for a special permit for nonconformities for an upward extension in a current front yard setback. Can I move this slide, or is that on your?
Andy,
you can just say next, and I'll advance.
You got it, bud. Of course, thank you. Next. So obviously the goal here, we're taking an existing structure, single-story ranch at 10 Briggs Ave, and looking to increase the footprint, both increase the height as well as the overall footprint of the property. Right now, the property does sit about 20.4 feet from the current yard setback or the property line. We are looking to, which obviously is under the required 25 feet, but in some of the exhibits we'll show you, obviously it sits inside of the average setback of the rest of the properties on both Briggs and Browns Ave. So we're looking to cantilever the second floor, which would bring that 20.4 existing setback to an 18.4 foot setback, as well as obviously increasing the height of this property. So really what we're looking to do here is just increase the footprint upward, which would obviously in turn bring us a little bit closer at that 18.4 from the front yard property. We will be swinging a two-car garage off of Browns Ave, moving the driveway to Browns Ave from Briggs. We did submit the row application to the city, and that is signed off here on one of the slides as well. So at this point, from a detrimental height perspective, we have an exhibit that shows the house directly across the street. We're right in line with most of the homes on this street. Have put a second story on the property. I did get a couple of letters of approval or support from neighbors. I sent those in yesterday. We took a little while to get those back from neighbors. But overall, I guess, we can go to the next slide, which will be some support. Here's just obviously the statistics of our required, existing, and proposed dimensional controls. All other dimensional controls will be within the lines of what's required. The only one here that's we need approval for is that front yard setback. All others will be within those dimensional controls. Next. So this is your current elevation of the home. Again, a single-story ranch, about 13 feet tall. And then we can go to the next. And then we are looking at obviously adding that second story. We did try to keep that second story down, so we lowered the roof height a little bit to try to keep it a little bit more in line with the properties in the neighborhood. As you can see, it's, we dormered the front of it to try to give us a little bit lower of a roof height, so it wouldn't dwarf anything in the neighborhood. And then we are swinging around the corner for the. You could probably go on the next, would show us a good side of the view. So on the side, you'll see that the 27 foot height on the upper side of the property on the Briggs Ave side, and just about 30 from grade and 27 mid-ridge on the Browns Ave side. That garage will be cut into the hill that it sits on currently. Next. This is just the plot plan. If we need to zoom in, you can see where that property will, where that new structure will sit in relation to the existing structure. Driveway coming off of Browns Ave. Next. Here is just showing some of the properties around ours and where they sit in relation to the street. Obviously trying to take some dimensions. We sit roughly 30 feet from the street. Like I said, 20.4 feet from our property line. most of the houses are all within similar setbacks as to what we will have moving forward. And then the next slide just shows the house across the street from a height perspective, to give you a perspective as to what we're trying to do with staying within the heights of the neighborhood. And then the last slide there is just our row permit application, which was signed off by the city. We had them come out, look at the property, and address any concerns that they had. At this point, that's all I have. Again, we're just looking for a special permit, nonconformities upward extension due to the front yard setback currently at 20.4. We want to increase that as well as bump that second floor out to give us a little bit of an overhang on the second floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Monaco. And before we go into the public comment, I just want to make one sort of weather note for everyone. I'm looking at on a weather app, we've got some pretty serious thunderstorms and lightning. In the event, unlikely though it is that we all lose power or any one of us loses power, unfortunately, we're not in the City Hall Council chambers. So just rest assured that Mr. Port and the planning office will reach out and make sure that we pick up where we left off and everyone will be rescheduled. So in the event that happens, we'll just, that'll be the game plan. Okay. Closing that portion of the public hearing, we'll now go to public comment. And again, I just draw your attention to the instructions for public comment slide that Mr. Port has put up. We ask you to kindly adhere yourselves as close to the 2 minutes per person as possible. Just raise your hand if you wish to be heard and give us your name and address. Anyone wish to be heard on this application? Seeing no hands, going once, going twice. I do see one hand, Mr. Ralph Gillis. Mr. Gillis, if you would unmute your mic, the bottom left, and Andy, if you can unmute Mr. Gillis's mic. Mr. Gillis, you have the floor.
And Mr. Gillis, you'll have to unmute on your end as well. Mr. Gillis, there is a, oh, you've got it. It looks like you've got it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, my concern has nothing to do with the height of the house. I live across the street. I'm at Love and Briggs Ave. That was, I believe, that was the picture that the gentleman showed. My concerns is the construction. We're already dealing with all the construction vehicles that are going over to the new development over at the old golf course. And now they're going to be parked across the street or in front of my house. I'm concerned about the what time of day this is going to be starting and ending, and on the week, what is the schedule for the weekends? Those are my concerns with this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Was there anything else, Mr. Gillis?
No, that's it.
Very good, thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to be heard? Just click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and we will recognize you to be heard. Okay, seeing no further hands, giving another moment, still no further hands. I will close that portion of the public hearing and we will go to questions from the board. We'll begin with questions. Mr. Moore, why don't you lead us off?
Thank you, Mr. Ciampetti. I have a couple of questions. One more related to one of the comments in our notes from the planning office was that there appear to be several large trees near the street and waiting for recommendations from our tree commission, for lack of a better word. And when I went by to look at the site, I didn't see any large trees and looked like I saw some, it was a stump grinding. So just curious, were the trees removed, I guess is my question, or did I just miss them?
Yes, this is Braden Monaco again. They were removed when we submitted the application. Nothing was mentioned to us about the city lines. The ones we removed, the large one in front of the house, we had Collins Tree come out and look at all the trees in the property, most of which were already dead. The large one sitting directly in front of the house was sitting directly on the property line. And I have spoken with the city since. I guess the tree ordinance or the person in charge of that is out on vacation, so we're trying to meet with them. But we plan on, you know, planting trees and whatever requirements the city is going to require for anything that to replace those. But again, there was at this point we didn't see any that were removed. I don't believe that were on the city's right of way.
Okay. I appreciate that. And then, you know, that's always something that gets worked into it. And I know that originally that there were not any additional trees recommended, but now those are missing. I'm sure you'll have that conversation and I'll get worked into any decision that's made one way or another. The other question I had was a little bit more on the proposed driveway and cut into the hill. It's a pretty big hill there. So I didn't know, was that going to be just, is it blacktop? How far into the hill do you have to cut to make that work, I guess, with the rest of the house?
Yeah, so if you look at the plan that's showing here, the driveway will be from the property line about 25.5 feet. So from the street, it's roughly, I'd say 30 feet, 35 feet or so. There will be, we'll work a small retaining wall on the, if you're looking at the driveway face on the right-hand side, and everything else from the backyard will be graded down. And then that garage will be sunk into the hill.
Thank you very much. That's all I have right now.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if you could answer a couple questions regarding the materials that you're going to use on the exterior, the windows, the siding, etc.
Yep, of course. For I guess for reference sake, this property, we just completed property on 4 Hart Road. The property that we're looking to, this 10 Briggs will be very similar. They will be, the products we used for that home were an SWS window made out in Western Mass. They're black windows. The intention here is to have using hardy board as the siding is the intention. So that I think that'll be a very clean look for, and again, very, very similar, if not identical to the look that you'll see at 4 Hart Road here in Newburyport as well.
Okay, so on that, the roof of the porch there, is that going to be some sort of like an aluminum roof or something like that?
Yeah, great question. So the eyebrow and the portico roof there will be a standing seam metal roof, and then the upper roofs will all be traditional shingles.
Okay, and then Andy, if you could go over to number 6. Thanks.
It will not be that. It will not be in that direction. It just didn't carry over, and I don't know why. As we're sliding through this, I noticed it was vertical. It should be horizontal clapboards on that side.
Okay, so it's just going to be your standard.
Yeah, same as the front. Yeah, my apologies there.
No, that's okay. It just caught my eye. I just wanted to ask you. All right, that does it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle. Mr. Swanton.
Yeah. Could you put up the plot plan, Andy? So I'm just trying to understand the first floor of this house, it's still going to be there, right? You're just putting a second floor on top of it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And so, the second floor would just, the goal to gain a little bit more square footage on the second floor is to overhang the front and the back by 2 feet to gain a little bit more usable space on that second floor.
Right. Well, that was kind of a good lead into my second question, which was kind of the reason you're here is that you're too close to the street for the current zoning which is 25 feet and you're at 20.4. So did you think about just keeping 20.4? I mean, you're kind of like rubbing it in a little bit by going to 18.4 with the second story. You're actually getting closer on the one thing you're too close on, or are you simply arguing that, hey, everybody else in the neighborhood is kind of that close, so, that's fine? I mean,
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, truthfully, I can tell you we're not trying to rub anything in. My goal was to just, from a square footage perspective on the second floor, that 2 feet because the first floor structure is so small in itself, to gain the bedrooms. So one of the things we didn't want to do was increase the square footage above the garage. So whereas the room above the garage is only a single story. We're not going to go double story. So obviously the garage is at ground level on Browns. then you have the one floor. So there's not gonna be a second story above there, or in this case, a third, which we could, obviously do from a height perspective. So we wanted to gain as much square footage as we could in that second floor to accommodate a 4-bedroom dwelling. And that extra 2 feet for the length of the house was a big difference for us in trying to fit in bathrooms and things of that nature. And then structurally, it was helpful for the eye joists and stuff we're going to do. We're going to be able to carry that distance for us as well. So by no means rubbing it in, but we did notice when we look at the neighborhood, we're right in line from a setback perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's not a bad answer, really. Andy, could you put up that neighborhood slide again? I think it's the next one. And could you just zoom in a little bit? Because I had a hard time reading the numbers.
Yep.
So like, okay, so this shows like you're on the corner right there at the 30.2. Is that you there? Which
the 30, yep, 30.2. Yep. So,
okay.
we had trouble from the street. We went from the street just to kind of give it perspective as to how you look at it coming down the street, because everyone's setbacks a little bit different. I think more from a visual perspective, as you enter the street, it's not going to be detrimentally, sticking out or causing, visual problems. Everything's within that, 28 to 30 foot range. So, a couple of them even closer at this point with some of the structures they have. So we didn't think that the adding the 2 feet as an overhang would be detrimental to, the structure itself.
Okay, well, thank you. That's kind of a very helpful illustration. The last question I have was actually asked by the abutter, and about your construction schedule. And I for the sake of the abutter here, this board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, really has nothing to do with the construction schedule. But just for information, it doesn't affect our decision. But the question was asked, and if you could just speak to it briefly, that would be helpful.
Of course. No, I mean, it's a great question. I'd welcome, conversation with anyone in the neighborhood that has any issues as we're going along. I mean, we're reasonable individuals for one. We had a great relationship with all the neighbors on Hart Road as we did our project over there, and they could attest to that. Our goal is to just work within the city's requirements of the city's, their work ordinances. Most work will be done, Monday through Friday at, within with the limited hours. Traditionally, it's probably a 7:30 start, probably more 7:30, probably to a 3:30, 4 o'clock finish. Obviously there's, depending on weather and time frames and things of that nature, some of those can extend a little bit, and maybe it's a Saturday morning. We ourselves don't love to work on Sundays, so I can promise you that there's not gonna be too much going on there. If it is, it's probably clean up, and we're just walking around making sure the property's clean and taken care of. We do pride ourselves in making sure the property's clean, making sure that things are taken care of and organized so that it's not an eyesore throughout the construction process. And again, if there's any neighbors that, throughout the process have issues, we're open and have a conversation. When we don't bite, so certainly willing to work anything out that we need to.
Okay, hey, I really appreciate your answer to that. And that's my final question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Moving on to Mr. Bennett.
I have no questions. I would just say the exhibit, which outlines the surrounding home setbacks, it's very instructive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I too don't have any questions that my colleagues haven't already posed. So I thank my colleagues for raising them and for the applicant for addressing them as well. Any other questions from the ZBA before I close this portion of the public hearing? Seeing none, we will close the questions portion of the public hearing, and we will move on to deliberations. The deliberation section, again, members of the ZBA, this is a special permit for nonconformities. So I'll ask that in our deliberations that you kindly tailor as you see fit deliberations around the legal criteria that must be found by the Zoning Board of Appeals on this application. And we'll begin with Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Ciampetti. I mean, the application is very straightforward. It was well presented. Again, the comp tables of the setbacks, as mentioned by my colleagues, was very informative and very helpful. So I think it's clear that the project, as presented, is going to be an improvement to that corner lot in general. And as is, there's no new nonconformity being added. It's just extending upward and maybe slightly intensifying the nonconformity that's there in the front yard setback. but still no new nonconformity. So that's checked the box on one. And then given the comp tables that we saw and having checked the neighborhood out and compared the addition of the garage to the structure in the second story, given the size of the lot, I can't see, mass isn't a problem. I can't see it being any more detrimental to the neighborhood than what's there. In fact, again, an improvement. So other than making sure we have the cooperation with the tree commission now with those 2 trees removed and vacation, which we can work into the, to any proposal that we make to move forward on this, I can support this.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to agree with Mr. Moore. Very well said. And I think especially with the applicant's indication that they'd be willing to listen to the neighbors with respect to the construction and the project itself, I can support this also.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle. Mr. Swanton.
Yeah, I too can support this for the reasons my colleagues have already expressed.
Thank you, Mr. Swanton. And Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I will agree with my colleagues. In my view, it's an aesthetic improvement to the neighborhood. It's tastefully done, and certainly, my view is a positive benefit to the neighborhood. So I can support this as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bennett. I have to say I agree. I feel that especially telling is that there is, usually if there is great unrest in the most adjacent and relevant portion of the neighborhoods, we hear from it in the form of a butter commentary or a butter concern or worse. And we have none here, which actually in its silence kind of speaks to the support, or I'll just say the lack of opposition, which tends to mean that it's well thought out and well done. I think that the applicant has certainly met the criteria, and it's a credible project, and it's certainly a reasonable one. So I too can support it. We will go ahead and close the deliberations portion of the public hearing, and I will move to inviting a motion. Do we have a motion to approve from the ZBA?
I will move that's the application number 2021-42, 10 Briggs Avenue for special permit for non-conformities be approved, subject to the standard condition relating to compliance with any requirements relative to the tree commission.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle. So the motion's made and seconded by Mr. Delisle. I'm sorry, made by Mr. Bennett and seconded by Mr. Delisle. Calling the roll on the motion to approve. Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Swanton.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Rob Ciampetti, I vote yes. That's 5 in the affirmative. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the special permit for nonconformities on 10 Briggs Avenue is approved. Thank you very much for the presentation, and good luck. Good luck to you both, Mr. Monaco, Mr. Farrar.
Thank you guys very much. We appreciate the support.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great evening. All right, so moving on to our last public hearing on our agenda this evening. This is the application of 8688 Prospect Street. The applicant, Blake Wilcox, manager of 8688 Prospect Street, LLC. And this is the docket 2021-43, a special permit for nonconformities. The applicant seeks to renovate and add on an addition to an existing 5-unit building. And I believe on behalf of the applicant, we have Attorney Mark Griffin. Attorney Griffin, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
Great. I'm Mark Griffin. I'm an attorney at Finneran and Nicholson with an office at 30 Green Street in Newburyport. My remainder of the project team that's with me tonight is Matt Langis, the architect, and Blake Wilcox, as you mentioned, is the manager of 8688 Prospect Street LLC. and he's here tonight as well. I should also mention that Mr. Wilcox is the principal in Joppa Group, with the firm that does the construction of the homes, and has done many homes in Newburyport, and maybe some of you have actually seen his work. We like to think that he does premium quality construction. The first slide, please. So just to give an overview of the project before I get into existing conditions and details, this is a renovation and an addition to an existing 5-unit building. The building is located at the corner of Prospect Street and Parsons. There's a proposal to construct a new 3-car garage. There is a proposal to create permeable parking areas and driveway access off of Parsons Street. This project did not trigger Historical Commission review under the DCOD, since we are not taking down more than 25% of exterior walls. This project did, however, trigger minor site plan review with the planning board. And we have gone through a minor site plan review up to the point of a so-called straw vote, in which we got a continuance to see what the outcome of the zoning board decision would be, so that when we went back to site plan review, we could match the two decisions. So right now we have an affirmative straw vote at minor site plan review, and we are continued pending the outcome of this. Next slide, please. So we are here for a special permit for nonconformities, but the existing conditions are that the property will continue to be a 5-unit multifamily residence as it is right now. It is a pre-existing non-conforming multifamily use within the R2 zoning district. The non-conformities that I mentioned are that the lot area, although it's a rather large lot for that particular neighborhood, it's 11,223 square feet, where 24,000 would be required for 5 units of multifamily. The front setback is very close to the street at 1.2, where 20 feet would be required, and the side setback, 8.5 is provided and 10 feet is required. The special permit for nonconformities is necessary pursuant to section 9B2B, since this is a proposal to put an addition on a pre-existing multifamily structure in use. Next slide, please. So the proposed addition, the addition and garage will not add any new nonconformities, nor will it intensify or alter any existing ones. That's important because 9B2B requires that. And then the second, sort of prong of 9B2B is that it can't be more substantially more detrimental than what exists to the neighborhood. So the proposed addition and garage will conform to all the required dimensional requirements. We will be converting the existing paved driveway to permeable pavement that will increase better stormwater drainage. And of course, the addition will not result in the structure or use being substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So here is a depiction of the zoning matrix. And as you can see, in spite of our new addition, there won't be any increases of the nonconformities because the proposed, they remain the same. The addition that we're putting on and the garage both meet the required setback distances, and neither of these footprints require any sort of dimensional relief with respect to lot area or open space. Next slide, please. There's the aerial view of the existing site, the way it is right now. As you can see along Parsons Street, the parking area where those 2 cars are, that's near where the garage will be. And then the sort of L-shaped notch of the existing building on the side closer to Lime Street, that's where the addition will be, and that'll be more clear by other plans that we'll show you. So next slide, please. So here's shots of the existing building from Parsons Street and the corner of Parsons and Prospect. The main structure, as you can see, is behind this odd addition that's at the corner, which is believed used to be a commercial use of some sort, but is now residential. So that's all going to stay. But the form and substance of the main building is behind it. So next slide, please. And then you can see from Prospect Street, as we mentioned, this is a corner lot. The longest leg of frontage is along Parsons. This is the shorter leg. And again, showing the odd bump out addition and then the doorway to the main building. Next slide, please. Another shot of the corner with that strange notch, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't appear that that we could actually demolish that without getting permits. We don't believe we might not be able to get. So, and then from the Parsons Street side is the photo to the right, which just shows that. You can also see that the property is a little bit tired, and it's vinyl sided. It's been added onto quite a bit since the original house was constructed. Next slide, please. So there's the driveway that's along where the area of the proposed garage is, along Parsons Street. So where it will be. And then that's the view from Parsons of the proposed garage site. You can see the existing asphalt pavement. That'll be replaced again with permeable asphalt. Next slide, please. So here's a shot from sort of the rear yard area. And the rear of those abutting properties are properties that are run along Lime Street. So it's the backyards of those homes along Lime Street. So the addition will face that particular perspective. And you can see from the photo, they're unlikely to see too much of the addition, but with the shed in the way and also the distances between these properties and the addition. Over from the garage area, the next photo toward 4 Parsons Street, you can see again, probably a minimal amount of view from 4 Parsons Street to the proposed garage area. Next slide, please. And then here's another perspective from where the garage will be, sort of right where the car is, almost right at the end of it. And then facing 4 Parsons to the left. And to the right, the photo to the right is perspective facing properties across the street from the proposed garage. Next slide, please. Another view from across Parsons Street. And to the right photo, that is at the corner of Parsons across the street to those properties. The chain link fence to the left across Parsons is the Brown School playground. Next slide, please. This is directly across Prospect Street from the property. And then the photo to the right is from Parsons Street looking down sort of the right driveway, which will be along Prospect, not the driveway that leads into the garage, the secondary driveway. And you can see there's quite a bit of tree cover there. So again, probably a minimal amount of view of what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is the plot plan, which shows the sort of the footprint of what's existing and what's proposed. Thank you, Mr. Fort. So you can see the existing two-story wood frame building with the shaded boundary, and then to the northwest, I guess you'd call it, the proposed addition. So that sort of fills in that L-shaped area, with the existing building wall. And when you look at the proposed garage, which is over to the southerly corner of the lot, the garage is, off of the street by about 20 feet, and it's off the setback by 10.1, so complies with both setbacks. The proposed addition also complies with the side yard setback of 10 feet, so it's 10.1, so it does not extend or alter any nonconformities. And then there's nothing being proposed along the building walls where we have non-conforming setbacks. So the special permit for nonconformities is only for the mere fact that we're asking to do an addition to a building that has some non-conforming dimensionals and also has a non-conforming use. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan from site plan review in front of the planning board. So this is what the planning board has essentially said they're okay with, to the extent that the zoning board has anything that may change to that. We will go back to the planning board and make changes in accordance with the zoning board decision if it's different. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them. As you can see over to the left in front of the garage, it's indicated to be proposed permeable asphalt paving. And then over in the upper right-hand corner along Prospect Street, where the other driveway is, that's going to be pavers, permeable pavers. Okay, so mainly for aesthetic purposes. So, and that's the site plan review plan. Next slide, please. And so here we are at the elevations for the proposed project. And at this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Blake Wilcox and then Matt Langis. So Blake Wilcox could speak, that would be great, Mr. Fort.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I'm going to keep it brief because Matt is going to walk you through a lot of the details. I just wanted to bring a little bit of the history of this project. So Matt and I worked, dare I say, tirelessly on this one to really bring this back to life, right? So Mark made mention of the sort of the amalgam at the front of the property, right here to the bottom right of your screen. We put a lot of effort into trying to bring this forward, and put a lot of detail into this, but also to retain some of what it used to look like. A lot of the key ingredient here, and one of the things I really loved about this property, quite frankly, was the open space at the rear. So one of the things I really wanted to protect during this was doing the addition. I really did not want it to extend beyond the existing sort of visual lines of the house. And you can see that here, really in these two elevations is a really good sort of visual. You can see on the lower left here, it's really kind of what I referred to as the peekaboo view of the addition from this vantage point, which is on Parsons Street. And then on the top of the screen, again, I call this the peekaboo view of the addition. This is from Prospect Street. And you can see on the upper right-hand corner, again, really the vision here was twofold. Keep the addition from the street view minimal and to protect the green space that is there currently. Because it is, look, I live in the South End, I'm 2 streets over. Green space is is very valuable, and it is very, it is a very important treasure in the South End. And I actually did want to retain a lot of it, which is why I really tried to keep the garage on the existing, what is used now for parking. I really tried to squeeze it right onto that to protect all of that green space in the back of the property. So with that, I can get very long-winded. I won't. I'm going to turn it over to Matt to walk you through the fine-grained details.
Great. Thanks, Blake. Good evening, everyone. Matt Langis, Scott Brown Architects, 48 Market Street, Newburyport. Before I jump into the proposed drawings, kind of piggybacking up on what Blake said, I just wanted to quickly show the existing elevations. Andy, could you please go to sheet EC4? Great. That's perfect, thank you. So the main box of the house was constructed sometime around 1850, and it's had, as Mark had mentioned, it's had some smaller additions that have been sort of tacked on throughout the years, each of which are in pretty rough shape, both physically and aesthetically. So those can be best seen in the left elevation. And in essence, what we're proposing to do is leave the original form as is, and then strip the exterior of some of those worn down materials, and then add an addition that complements the existing character. Andy, if you could please go back to sheet 2.1, A2.1. So continuing off of what Blake said here, we're using a very traditional 6/6 Muntin style for the windows. So we're sort of paying homage to pieces of the existing character, but we're replacing them with a charcoal gray aluminum clad window. We're also replacing these existing siding with a pre-primed hardy plank clapboard. So we're also using architectural asphalt shingles and introducing a charcoal gray standing seam metal roof at the new entry locations. The existing first floor additions, the ones that have sort of been tacked on, are highlighted and grounded by a change in siding and color. So we're doing some smaller details there at the lower level to dress that up. Also adding smaller brackets at the eave line of that corner addition, and then using a different sort of material there to ground that first floor using a pre-finished shingle there with a 5.5-inch exposure instead of the clapboard. Next slide, please. So these elevations show the addition in the rear, which is just over about a 600 square foot footprint. The addition is really designed to complement the original structure in a few ways, really. So what we're doing here is extending that hipped roof. We're continuing the 6/6 style windows, wrapping the corner of this addition, and then preserving the aesthetic look of the clapboard siding by continuing that sort of, that white 4-inch exposure there around the corner. And then this is all pretty consistent, matching the aesthetic character of the surrounding neighborhood. There's several examples of not only 6/6, but the clapboard, also the hip roofs. And this is sort of done pretty consistently throughout the South End as well. Next slide, please. So this is a garage that we're also proposing. It's a new 3-car, 22 by 36 foot garage off of Parsons Street. Right now we're showing a 6 pitch for the roof. And that keeps the height under 15 feet to the ridge. But the garage windows, the siding, the colors, the PVC trim, that's all consistent with the changes and renovations that are happening to the main building. The only real additional material change here is the switch to a synthetic slate for the shingles. So because this is a single story, we thought it was presented a nice opportunity for us to highlight a better quality roofing material that would be seen and appreciated differently from the street. And then finally, all of the proposed lighting will be a downward directed wall-mounted sconces, and those are located at the near the entry units of each of the units. I'm sorry, the entry doors of each of the units, and also between the garage doors. That actually concludes the portion of the architectural presentation. At this point, unless there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I'll turn it back over to Attorney Griffin to close out the presentation.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And so, and thank you for moving the slide forward, Mr. Port. So in order to conclude this, I'll just run through a little bit of the ordinance itself, what the standard is, and what, in fact, we're doing that complies with that standard. And so first off, it's the 9B2B2 standard. So it's, we're a multifamily use in a multifamily structure that is in the R2. So we're non-conforming as to the use. We're also non-conforming as to two of the dimensional requirements, the setbacks, side and front. And so as a result of that, we cannot have any new nonconformities or extend any or intensify any existing ones under 9B2B. And so this project does not do that. The new addition complies with the setback. The garage complies with the setback. Now to the substantially more detrimental standard. So the additions being located in the back corner, this is intentional. As Matt mentioned, it's meant to complement the form of the original building. It's not going to appear to add significantly to massing and scaling of the building, since again, it's sort of in the back corner and not visible from the street very much. And so it also meets the lot coverage and open space requirements. So adding the addition did not intensify or create any new nonconformities there. We're not adding to the mean roof height of the structure. So that's another instance of, paying respect to the original building. The visual impact is intended to be minimal by the location of the addition. And the location of the garage, we believe also will have, not adverse visual impact to the neighbors. Of course, the building will be built in accordance with local and state building codes. It will be built to all safety standards. It will upgrade a tired building and create better aesthetics in the neighborhood. The design's in keeping with the existing architecture of the home, so as to make the addition blend in. The enlarged structure will result in a de minimis extension of the use. And the reason we say that is that although we're adding space, we are not increasing the number of units. So we're staying at 5 units, just like it was before. So we don't believe that this is going to have much less an adverse impact on the neighborhood. We believe it's going to be a positive benefit to the neighborhood because of the upgrade in aesthetics. And so for all of those reasons, we believe that this proposal will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what exists. And one last thing I did forget to mention in closing was the improvement in stormwater drainage with using the permeable pavers and permeable asphalt. And so for all of these reasons, I would respectfully request that the board grant the special permit for nonconformities. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Attorney Griffin. Closing that portion of the public hearing, we'll go now to public comment. And again, just directing everyone's attention to the public comment slide that you'll see put up on the screen in just a moment. If you can just limit your comments to about 2 minutes and just raise your hand if you wish to be recognized, and we'll open the floor for your comment. Just give your name and address if you could as well. Any comments? Anyone wish to speak in connection with this application? Seeing no hands just yet. I do now see a few hands starting to come up. We'll recognize Stephanie Nikitich. Stephanie, if you want to go ahead and unmute your mic, and Andy, if you can unmute Ms. Nikitich's mic. Stephanie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie Nikitich, 93 High Street. I have 2 comments. First, this project has avoided a DCOD permit and historical commission review because the percentage of exterior demolition is shy of the trigger by just 0.03%. Perhaps with historical commission review, the applicant could have been convinced to remove the later commercial addition. Whenever I see something so close, I am skeptical. If I were in a butter to this project, I would want an independent analysis of the measurements. Also, such a close demolition plan, I hope, will result in very careful city enforcement inspections. Second, the Historical Commission may have also reviewed and had comments on the so-called top quality materials proposed, being hardy plank and aluminum windows. I hope that the board will ask for more details about the proposed windows. I appreciate the synthetic slate on the garage roof, and perhaps this could be conditioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nikovich. I see Mr. Coulter-John's hand up. Andy, if you could unmute Mr. Coulter-John's mic. And Mr. Coulter-John, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can, sir.
Thank you. Tom Coulter-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. I just have a couple of comments. Several times during the presentation, there were references to the odd bump out addition in the front. And I think this project would be much better. It would substantially improve it. And it would pay respect to the original building if the applicant got rid of the odd bump out addition in the front. The commercial aspect of it clashes with the original structure and just, it blocks it. There are a couple of windows missing from the original structure, and it impedes on the front original entrance. So my suggestion is simply to go back to the drawing board a little bit. Perhaps if you need more space, make the addition in the back a little bit larger if you're losing too much space in the front. But the front itself would present to Newburyport in general and to everybody a much more positive aspect if you brought back the original front facade on Prospect Street. It would look so much better. So that's a suggestion to improvement. And I honestly hope that the architect and Blake will consider that. I think it would be a major improvement. And the other aspect is I kind of echo Stephanie Nikovich's comments on the quality of materials, and that they should be listed, and they could be better. I think a review from the Historic Commission would have been better on this project. But I hope you'll seriously consider get rid of that odd shaped box, the bump out in the front of the building. I think that would be a public service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter-John. Anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else wish to be heard on this? I see no additional hands. Going once, going twice. I will close that portion of the public hearing, and we will go to questions from the board, beginning with Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chimpity. Well, I'll take the layup going first here and just ask the applicant, was removal of the bump out considered? Because I thought the same thing looking at it. Obviously it doesn't belong. It's a beautiful structure, a more beautiful structure without that. So I'll just ask the question, was it considered? And I think I know the answer, but I think it was alluded to in that there were permits that we'd have to get that we didn't want to get or didn't know you could get. But I'd just like to hear the reasoning or the thought process that might have gone into consideration of removing that corner enclosure, I guess, that looks very commercial.
Can I answer that, please, Mr. Moore?
Sure.
So it was never a realistic consideration because we did not believe that we could get the approval, and that's the long and the short of it. And also, there are space requirements, as Mr. Coulter-John had mentioned, and taking that space and moving it to another space might have actually created a new nonconformity or intensified an existing one, and then we'd be looking at a variance. We even considered, filling in the notch on the corner of that odd addition, but that would have been a variance as well. So the hurdle would be very high from a permitting standard. So what we tried to do is the best we could aesthetically with the cards that we were dealt.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just sort of picking up on the DCOD issue. I'm just curious, Andy, could you go to the slide? I think maybe it's 22 or 23, the ones that show the DCOD analysis. No, the DCOD analysis. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So I'm just a little bit curious about this, a little bit, I don't know, I guess concerned, because it seems like, it was kind of backed into from a mathematical perspective, because if there were one additional square foot that were to be removed, you would be required to go to the Historical Commission under the DCOD portion of the ordinance. So it just seems like it's a little bit too close for my liking. Is there, what can you say about that?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Matt Langes. I could speak to that, Mr. Delisle. This was a super, to be blunt, this was super challenging. I think, in a traditional way, what we've also done in the past too with some previous projects is when we've added an addition onto the end of a structure, we were allowed to not necessarily subtract that square footage, but that square footage didn't count against us to the DCOD calculations. This isn't the case with this addition because it's sort of set up in a corner configuration. So that was a sort of an immediate disadvantage that we were trying to work with. And a lot of these existing windows, in order to make the bedrooms, most of the livable spaces on the inside work, a lot of that had to do with the size of the bedrooms, and most of which are very close to 10 feet, if not just there. So it was super challenging to work with, and we got down to the fraction of a number to make sure that we were overcompensating, to make sure that there was, I basically rounded up on every window dimension just to give us a little bit more play, and we're really tight. So it's a challenging, approach here, but we are under, and we fought really hard to make sure that we were under that 25%.
Thank you, Mr. Langes.
Can I jump in on this real quick, guys? So sorry, it's Blake, right? So we do a lot of work on these homes in the South End. Dare I say we've become pretty good at this stuff. I am very sensitive to the exterior walls. We pay a tremendous amount of attention to detail when it comes to working on these exterior walls. When we touch the windows, we touch the sheathing. If you've seen our work over the years, we put a tremendous focus on.
If I could just interrupt you for a second.
Yep, please do.
I understand what you're saying. However, I feel like you appreciate this because you spoke on this as a concerned citizen. I mean, if you guys are doing this work and one additional square foot needs to be removed, or 5 additional square foot need to be removed, do you stop work and go to the planning office and tell them this, and then you're at Historical in the middle of the project? Or are we at redoing the debacle of Harrison Street? So I'm just concerned because you're so close.
Well, could I speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure, please.
So I understand the concern, Mr. Delisle, and I do know also that this was gone through with a fine-tooth comb by the zoning administrator. So I don't believe there's any question that the numbers are what they are, or that there was any sort of license taken. And
Mr. Griffin,
yes.
just a moment. I don't think that's what I said. I proposed.
No, you didn't.
piece of the wall fell out.
You did not say that, sir. I was just trying to make the point that, you know, we made it with the math. We comply with the provisions of the ordinance. And so there's always going to be, you know, applications where it's close to the 25, but it isn't 25. And so then it becomes, as you mentioned, an enforcement issue. And so at that point, it's the zoning administrator or the building inspector's job to monitor it. Of course, Blake and his crew, if it looks like they accidentally took something out or took something out that they shouldn't have, their duty is to report it. And so could it wind up going to historic in the middle of a project? I suppose it could. But you could say that if it was 24 feet, 24 square, you know, 24%. You know, that could happen regardless of how close it is. I understand the heightened concern because of, you know, it's very close, but it is still the same standard.
Okay. I want to try to get, this is Rob Champetti again. I just want to try to get us back on track. So we left off with Mr. Delisle's question. Mr. Delisle, did you have further commentary? I know that you had kind of relinquished the floor to Mr. Wilcox to answer and address some of your questions. And then Attorney Griffin commented. Was there anything, did you wish to continue or did?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did, yes. Okay,
then you can, then please continue.
Thank you. The other thing I was a little concerned about was from the sort of the massing and the scale perspective and sort of the concerns regarding infill was the 3-car garage. I have some misgivings about the size of that. And I know that, you know, you're within the side setback and I couldn't tell, Andy, could you put the plot plan up? It is within the front setback. Okay, so you are within the 20 feet from the front. Okay, yeah, I still think that that's something that's kind of different for the south end. There are not a lot of 3-car garages floating around. I think that really sort of makes the property, I think, from the Parsons Street side seem really heavy. Did you guys, could you speak to that, Mr. Wilcox, just the decision on the 3 cars?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We did, yeah, Matt and I, we again spent a lot of time on this project, probably more than any other project we've done together over the years. But yes, we looked at this. I went back and forth with Matt on the 3, the 2, the 3, the 2. You know, I wanted to provide, again, I was trying to keep this project with as much green space in the back as possible. That really was my primary objective in this project from the get-go. I wanted to protect that. With that said, I'm going to take off my builder hat and I'm going to put on your hat because I know what you're saying and I don't disagree with you. There were times where I was like, you know, do I just go with the 2? You have to understand that this is a business for me too. I hate to say those words out loud, but it is. I made a business decision. I will tell you, I was 49-51 on this one. If that's a sticking point, I'm not going to push back that hard. I'm really not, because I will blame you and say, yeah, they wanted 2. I don't disagree with you. Again, I waffled on this one a lot through this project. 3-2, 3-2. If you have a strong sentiment one way, I'm not going to push back on it, quite frankly.
Got it. I appreciate that answer. Yeah, I think that would you know, that would help me because I think, you know, by and large, what you're doing here, you know, seems like a good idea. I mean, I guess I would kind of echo Mr. Moore's thoughts about it's a pity that front box can't come off and sort of restore the facade of the building. But yeah, I think that, you know, the garage thing for me seems like it's too big relative to the south end. So that's a concern for me. So I do appreciate your answer on that.
Yep. Nope. Again, I'm always going to give you the honest answer. And you know, again, from somebody who lives here, I will tell you that this one was a tough one for me. 49-51. So if that, again, something that helps, I'm definitely not going to push back on it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wilcox, and I do respect that you do provide the honest answer. So thank you for that. That's about all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Delisle. Mr. Swanton.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I'd like to get back to the point my colleague, Mr. Moore, started with. When you guys were going through this presentation and you described that the old storefront on the front of this thing is, I think one of you called it odd and somebody else called it an amalgam. I was kind of hoping you'd be open to changing it. And then I was very pleased to hear Mr. Coltajon comment during the hearing. He is the president, co-president of the Newburyport Historic Preservation Trust. Now, that's a private group. That's not the Historical Commission, but he's kind of out in front of every historical issue in town. And if he's telling you that, boy, it'd be a lot nicer without it, that's something. So I was kind of hoping you'd be amenable to that. Given that you're not, I guess my concerns are what's happening to this overall building. It's a 5-family building in a 2-family zone. It's a pre-existing, you know, your grandfather basically. But a 5-family building requires 24,000 square feet, as you've said, and you only have 11. So this is a very small lot for a 5-family building. Plus you're only 1.5 feet off the street on one side and a 1.8 feet on the other side. So you are about as close to the street. There's very few, I mean, I too live in the South End, but I'm having a hard time thinking of buildings that are on less than 2 feet of 2 streets. So, I mean, I was hoping you could do something with, thank you for bringing this picture up, this thing on the front. If you could, I'd feel much better about what you're doing to the overall density of this rather small lot for a 5-unit building. Because as I see it, you're going from a 23.4% lot coverage up to 36.2%. That's a 55% increase in density on a lot that's already less than half as big as it's supposed to be for a 5-unit building. And this is the South End. So I guess I'd like to come back to, why not do this right? I mean, and make this a beautiful building and get that thing off the front of it. Is it, I'd like you to speak again. I know Mr. Moore pushed you on this, but I'd like to hear again, why not? You know, if the zoning board's pushing you on it and you've already heard from the co-president of the Historic Preservation Trust, why not go ask the Historical Commission? I mean, I think you would have a much more beautiful building. I would think you could get more for the units, and I'd be much more comfortable on the zoning board with your increase in density for the overall site that you're asking us for, because that is something we need to approve. So please address my question.
Mark, I'll take this one. So this is kind of where y'all are asking me to open up my books, right? You want to know why I'm making business decisions, and that's always a slippery slope, right? But, you know, again, I'm a resident here, I'm a builder, so I kind of wear both hats, and good or bad, I need to answer this question truthfully, right? So there is a business decision that has to be made, unfortunately, with these projects. You're asking me to tear off, you know, and incur a fairly heavy cost. This would be a significant cost to this project. I know this building inside and out. You know, when we started this, I initially looked at just lobbing off the thing on the front and going for a much larger addition in the back. I really wanted, and again, look, you guys are asking me a question, I'm going to give you the no BS answer. I didn't want to have to sell 5 $1 million condos, guys, okay? I sometimes shake my head and just go, I'm attempting, dare I say these words out loud, to keep the costs reasonable. And in this market, it's nearly laughable, okay? Asking me to rip this off, completely restructurally rework the foundation in the front of this house, quite frankly, guys, I don't want to have to do that and have to sell 5 $1 million condos. I don't need you all to understand my margins. I don't need you all to understand construction costs in these old homes in the South End, what it costs to do these projects. I make these decisions, and it's an extremely complicated decision to make. I looked at this thing always. to rip this thing off and have to rework the foundation and rework all the structure. And then what I'd have to do to the back of this house, quite frankly, gentlemen, and people that are listening in, I don't want to do it. This is a good design. I am sorry that you all think that there's a better design by ripping off the front of this building, but I know what it takes to do these, quite frankly, better than most. It's not right for this project, and it's not going to be right to what I'll have to do to this project to make that work financially. And I know you don't want to hear these words, and to say I can get more for these, I don't want to get more for these, gentlemen. You know, this is a really tough decision for me to have to make. You know, but it all comes into the equation here. You asked me the question, I'm going to answer it truthfully. You know, I like this design. I think this looks good. I did not want to have to get into massive construction on this project and infill the thing in the back I'm trying to protect. I did not want to have to infill that green space in the back. I didn't want to have to do it. That's my answer.
Okay, I appreciate the answer. I mean, I used to run a business myself, so you don't need to go any deeper into the dollars and cents. So let me ask the other side of my question, which is, you know, this for a 5-family building, you're supposed to be on a 24,000 square foot lot. This thing's 11. Why should you're asking us to improve, nevertheless, you're asking us to increase the coverage on this lot by 55%. Why should we enable such a huge expansion on such an undersized lot for a 5-story structure?
Because we're under the lot coverage that is required in the ordinance. So you may think that it is more dense, but we're allowed to be as dense as 40% lot coverage. The ordinance sets parameters for that. The distances from buildings to the lot line, the amount of lot coverage, the minimum amount of open space, those are all designed to, you know, those are density limitations. So although we're making it so-called more dense, we aren't too dense in accordance with the ordinance. We comply.
I realize if you met all the stipulations of the ordinance, but you're on a very small lot for a 5-unit building and you're extremely close to 2 streets.
It's a pretty good sized lot for the south end and for the neighborhood. I mean,
I understand, but there's mostly 1- and 2-story family houses. You're talking about a 5-family unit. Let me just finish my question, which is we have to, in our job here, is to decide whether this is more detrimental to the neighborhood. So we need to decide whether this much additional density for a building that is on a very small lot relative to what it's supposed to be on for a 5-unit building, and for a building that's already extremely close to 2 streets, we have to decide whether that's more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that's what I'm asking you to speak to, not whether it's under 40. I understand that, but given that you're on such a tiny lot for a 5-unit building, when you're supposed to be on 24,000, you're only on 11. And given that you're almost on top of 2 streets, you know, what's in my head is I have to be one of the votes here to decide whether this is more detrimental to the neighborhood, what you're proposing with that amount of expansion. And so I'm asking you to speak to why is a building that is this close to 2 streets and on such a small lot, so why is it not more detrimental to the neighborhood?
Okay, may I speak to that, Mr. Swan?
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, Andy, could you please go back to slide number 5? Actually, it's slide number 6, sorry. So that's the lot in comparison to the other lots in the neighborhood. And you can see that it's actually one of the larger lots in the neighborhood, if not the largest in the surrounding neighborhood. And so, you know, whether it's substantially more detrimental or not has to do with its impact on the neighborhood. And that addition is being placed in the rear corner in the L. And as I had alluded to in my presentation, this is going to be of minimal impact to the majority of the neighborhood by that placement. And so if we could go to the photos again, Mr. Port. Let's move forward to show the ones where the addition is, which is going to be, so slide number 10. So that's the view from the area of the garage, but you can also see the area where the L is, and that's where the addition would be. So let's go forward one more slide, please. So here's the view facing the rear of the Lime Street homes. There's a fair amount of distance between where the addition is going to be and those abutting properties. So the visual impact is not going to be very drastic. There's a shed in the way that obscures the view of 85 Lime. 81 and 83 are fairly distant from where the addition is going to be. So they're set back in their rear yards, and the addition is set back in accordance with the setbacks for side yard. So again, the view from the proposed garage towards four Parsons, fairly obscured, I think, from view. And then the next slide, please. And so there we are with the view to 4 Parsons Street garage area. And so when considering, whether structure or use is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, it's that kind of impact that boards typically take into account. You also have to take into account the overall proposal. And so you're not just looking at the addition, you're looking at the whole project, which is renovation and the aesthetics that are coming from that. And so, we're taking a property that's aesthetically, I would say, displeasing, and we're making it, I believe, much more aesthetically pleasing. So far be it from being detrimental to the neighborhood, it's actually better than what's there. And what's being added on is not going to cause detriment to the abutting property owners based on those perspectives that I just showed you. I guess that's my answer. Mr. Swanton, did you have any further questions about that, or hope I answered your question?
Well, Andy, could you put slide 5 back up that we just started that answer with, please? Actually, 6. It was 6. It was a shot of the neighborhood. I guess this slide kind of encapsulates my problem. The neighborhood we're looking at are all 1 and 2 family houses. If they were before us tonight wanting to go to 36% lot coverage, they need a variance. It's not something they can do. The only reason you can do it is you have a 5-family house. So it's really not very representative of the neighborhood. So it's to put this slide up and say, well, we got more land here than the neighbors. Well, yeah, but you have 5 units. They only have 1 or 2. So it's, I guess I have a hard time with the answer you provided. And at this point, I don't have any more questions. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Mr. Bennick.
I have no questions. I think we've plumbed these issues well, and I may have some observations on all of these as we move forward in deliberations.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennick. And I too I believe that we've fleshed out a lot of the same questions I would have had, and I think we can just move into deliberations at this point. So I will close that portion of the public hearing, and we will now open deliberations. And again, in our deliberations, this is a special permit for nonconformities. So please govern our deliberations around the legal criteria required and the findings required for a special permit for nonconformities. And we will begin with Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without conforming my comment, just general comments in my deliberations, I'll move on. I think my colleagues dove in deeper and probably have a little more to say than I do, but I'll reserve the right at the end to come back. I struggle with asking someone to right the wrongs that have been done in order to move forward the project. So, I mean, the building would just look infinitely better if that corner notch wasn't there. And I think we all agree on that. But then, you know, should it be a requirement? Or is it a requirement? No, it's not really a requirement. So I struggle with that. But the points of, you know, the lot coverage and the fact that, you know, it is a grandfathered lot coverage that's there, that is a consideration. I don't see that as being as big a problem in my mind. I also don't have I'm also heartened by the fact that Mr. Delisle mentioned having a problem with a larger garage, and applicant was amenable to changing that because he was waffling on himself. So I'm not going to get too much into the detail of that, but that's where I am right now. I'm kind of still trying to work through some of the details and formulating an opinion on this, but I look forward to hearing the comments from my colleagues.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Delisle.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so, you know, here we are in deliberation. So certainly I am also, I was also heartened with Mr. Wilcox's response on the garage. So that seems like, you know, that issue will likely be put to bed for me. I do think that helps, you know, with the overall density to some degree. We do have a problem, as Mr. Swanton notes, that we have a small lot and we have this grandfathered or pre-existing use as a 5-family, which makes the calculus here unique for the lot and different relative to the neighborhood, which, you know, unless we all miss something, you know, these are single family and maybe 2-family homes. And I know that, you know, we've talked a lot about the neighborhood and we've seen a lot of pictures. So we are in a bit of a different situation. And this is tough because it is the 5-family use that exists here, and we have to be mindful of that. You know, I still remain concerned about the DCOD situation and, you know, how close that is to that line. But you know, I do understand, you know, what Mr. Swanton was trying to elucidate from the applicant and his attorney during his question period, and I do share those concerns.
Okay, was that the extent of your comments, Mr. Delisle?
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Swanton.
Yeah, you know, my concern, I think I kind of got into it in my questions. I'm concerned about the overall massing here, the amount that's being added between the addition and the garage to a building that's already very small on a very small lot for a five-family building and right on top of 2 streets. You know, I realize we can't ask you to take the thing off the front. I was hoping when you described it as odd and an amalgam, I was thinking, oh, they don't like it either. Maybe they'll do something, but you didn't. And we can't insist on it. But I kind of know where Mr. Coltajon was. If that was gone and you had a bigger addition on the back, the massing argument would not be as painful to me. But to take what's there and to mass it up with a garage and an addition, I think it is more detrimental to the neighborhood. So it's kind of, and I'm also very sensitive to the point that Mr. Delisle brought out about how close this thing is to going to the Historic Commission anyway. And if even during a careful demolition, if, you know, another square foot falls off, technically you're in violation. It's just, I think he brought up a really good point. And I think that needs to be emphasized as well. So anyway, that's where I am on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swanton. Mr. Bennett.
Yeah, I have a few observations. I guess my first observation would be that obviously we're not writing on a blank slate here. So, and I guess if we were, I suspect the applicant and the applicant's architect probably would do something much different, but that's not the case. So what we have in front of us is a pre-existing use for a 5-unit structure. And that, that for better or worse, that's what we're looking at. Secondly, I guess when we look at the corner notch, I suspect we all are dismayed by it. It's not architecturally appealing, and it is obviously an eyesore, but I don't think that obviously we have any, as the Zoning Board of Review, have any authority or jurisdiction to direct an applicant to tear that down. There may be other considerations, but we certainly don't have that authority. And secondly, the cost of doing that, I recognized, and it raises another equally important issue here, and that is the affordability and availability of housing in this community. So I think we must be mindful of those factors and not simply what might look aesthetically or historically pleasing. So I give no credence to the corner notch consideration, and if anything, I believe I would accept the developer's arguments on those and think that those are equally as valid in this community. So then I look at this project and I kind of see it in two components. First, there's the garage, and then there's the addition. So the addition is 620 feet, is that correct, give or take? Square feet? The way it is designed and fitted into the structure itself, in my view, certainly does not create any massing issues relative to the neighboring homes. And so that's where I come out on that. So then we kind of take a look at the garage. I think Mr. Delisle made a good point on the garage, and I tend to agree with him. I guess aesthetically, I may have a different perspective. I kind of think a garage is better than a swath of asphalt with 3 cars littering it in haphazard parking, but one can have a difference of opinion on that. And I understand and support the notion that the scale of the garage as it relates to the entirety of the project and the project itself might be better off if we had a 2-car garage here and not a 3-car garage, because that is an imposing structure without shadow of a doubt. Mr. Delisle's point about the, how close we are on the decon issue is one which has merit. However, I feel that there are ways to address that. One, the building inspector can do the building inspector's job to make sure the requirement is met. And 2, I think we have to take and accept, in the absence of any other evidence, that the presentation here is within the regulation. And it's not our job to, it's not a plus or minus, it's 25%. And that's what and it's less than that. And I am not going to speculate that something might happen and use that as the basis to deny an application like this. So all those things being said, I certainly support this. I think we have a structure that is not very appealing aesthetically. This is a significant improvement in that regard. I see no objectors from the community and from the neighborhood, which I find telling in this situation, very telling, in fact, if indeed there's this concern about massing and scale. But nobody has said a peep about that. There's nothing on the record. So for all those reasons, I am supportive of this project.
Thank you, Mr. Benick. And this is Rob Champetti. I agree with my colleagues and others who have mentioned that aesthetically, architecturally, and from a period standpoint, if not otherwise, that later period addition, the commercial space, certainly is out of sync with the architectural the architectural aesthetic of the rest of the structure. But I think, as my colleagues noted, and I think as we as a board have observed in other contexts, time is a linear thing. And so, we take each structure as we find it. And oftentimes we find it born of the alchemy of several periods of renovation, restoration, addition, and adaptive use and uses. And this is, just one of many examples, I'm sure. Though we judge it in a vacuum, and in still frame right now, based on our aesthetics in this moment, we, I think, have all offered a similar sense that it is, not favorable. I believe we may all, in fact, agree that it's, it's a little bit of a blemish on what could otherwise be a very nice sort of restoration. But be that as it may, those aren't choices that we as a board get to make, other than just simply observing them out loud. Though in this context, it's I'll call it a gentle improvement, because it's doing the very most and the very best with the least disruption and impact. And I guess when we run that through the lens of the economics of it, I can understand the applicant's sort of fragile balance that must be struck. In fact, I'd like to think I can understand, but only the applicant can purely understand, the economics, having drilled down, I'm sure, to the dollars and cents, down to the pennies of, how this could work. I, like Mr. Bennick, am very, I'm very persuaded by the lack of sort of negative voice or concern voice from the neighborhood, the most adjacent abutters, all of whom have been noticed, none of whom have spoken up, though I share many of the same sentiments of the two members of the public who did speak, Ms. Nikitich and Mr. Coulter-John, specifically with respect to how nice it would be to see the removal of that commercial space. But be that as it may, what we have is what we have, and within our purview as a board, we have to act with what we have. I think that it is an improvement. I think it is an adaptive reuse under the circumstances. I do think it's gentle under the circumstances, not as gentle and pristinely so as it could be, but I too would prefer not to see cars littered on vast open space, and having some permeable cover or pervious cover and a carriage house style architecture of a garage to shelter the vehicles, create some architectural interest, is a little bit of a massive intensification. But I think that the pickup there for the neighborhood and for the aesthetic is that the cars are no longer, primary in visibility. So, it's a tough one for me as well. But as as I'd said, I agree with my colleagues who are also challenged by this, and I feel though that in the totality, it is an improvement. I don't feel that it is more detrimental to the neighborhood, much less more substantially more detrimental than the existing conditions. I can't say in good faith that I find that could be, I can't find that a credible conclusion for me. So, so that's where I fall on it as well. Unless there are any further deliberations, I can close that portion of the public hearing. And I believe we are left with a motion from the ZBA to approve. Do we have a motion and a second? Anyone? We need someone has to make a motion to advance this to a vote. Do we have any members of the ZBA who wish to make that motion? I can't make the motion. I can only.
Greg Bennick, I'll move with respect to application 2021-43, special permit for nonconformities for 86-88 Prospect Street. Be approved.
Okay, motion is made by Mr. Bennick. Do we have a second?
I would second that with the amendment that was suggested by the planning department on conditions for trees. Okay. And I can state them right now if it
If you could.
If that's applicable.
Yeah.
So I will second that with the condition that the applicant shall remove existing crabapple and Japanese lilac on Prospect Street side and install 2 new Japanese lilacs. I'm not going to read the Latin. With a minimum DBH of 1.75 inches per the Tree Commission Chair's recommendations prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit. To ensure proper coordination, all tree plantings and or details shall be coordinated with the DPS. Tree installation shall be completed prior to the grant of any occupancy permit unless such timeline is extended and agreed upon date certain via written approval of the zoning administrator.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. The motion is made and seconded with the condition that sidewalk and tree recommendation as per the staff report be incorporated by reference and adopted as part of the motion into the record.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Delisle. Can I ask a question here?
Of course.
Thank you. Is this motion to adopt the plan as is, or how does that relate to the discussion with regard to the garage, 3 bays versus 2? Are we just, this is as is drafted on the plan?
Correct. Well, so all that we have before us, and it's a good question, Mr. Delisle. So all that is before us is the plan as submitted. That's all that's been noticed to the public. That's the those are the 4 corners of the application. That notwithstanding, during deliberations, or we could press pause and revisit if it were in the cards to do so, to inquire as to whether the applicant wishes to entertain any deviation from that, assent to it, in which case our motion would be scripted around the plan as it's submitted and filed, with any adaptations that we come up with, that are agreed to. But that is a dialogue that, we couldn't make a motion and then thrust upon the applicant a change to what has been submitted, though we could, as a board, make a motion to approve, it be seconded, and be for those reasons that motion not succeed. And so it's better, because I think it's more balanced and fair in light of the applicant's time and the public trust, that we in full disclosure discuss that before we do it, because if we vote in the negative as a board, we bar the applicant, barring some substantial changes to the plan. We end up barring the applicant from coming back before us for 2 years. I think before we ever were to do that, I would want to give fair notice to any applicant, so that any departures from the plan can be revisited, discussed. They could have an opportunity to step back if they wanted to, if that were the way it was going. So
may I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Attorney Griffin.
So we would be amenable to a condition of a decision, a favorable decision, obviously, that we submit a revised drawing showing a 2-bay garage.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Delisle, having heard Attorney Griffin, I want to make sure that I didn't cut you short with regard to any further discussion before we get into a vote.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
I'm just curious, would it be possible, I will advise my colleague, Mr. Delisle, that as the party making the motion here, I would be open to a friendly amendment to modify my original motion as modified, to limit the garage to 2 bays, if that might expedite this, but I will defer to your procedural expertise.
No, I mean, I'm not sure how much expertise other than just sort of the logic of it, but thank you, Mr. Bennett and Mr. Delisle. I think that the most efficient way to do this would be, if it's if the applicant is inclined, and Attorney Griffin says that they are, that we simply amend the motion you made, which would draft the second to also be a second on that amended motion. And then what we would be voting on, to answer Mr. Delisle's initial question, would be the plan as submitted, with the deviation that there's a new condition in addition to the tree inside the tree condition, the sidewalk and street tree condition. There would be a new condition, the second condition, that is that the applicant would submit a revised plan for the garage showing 2 bays versus 3 bays. And then that, I think, that certainly insulates and protects exactly what it is we're voting on and what the expectation is. Do members of the ZBA agree, or does anyone have any disagreement or further comment on that? If we were to proceed that way, would everyone be okay with that?
This is Mr. Delisle. I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, taking the time to go through all of that, and Mr. Bennick for amending the motion. That would work for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Delisle. So taking a quick pause and a very short rewind, we'll go back to Mr. Bennick's motion. Mr. Bennick, do you want to make your
yes,
motion?
I would like to amend my original motion to include a condition that the applicant submit revised plans for the garage demonstrating and outlining the garage as a 2-bay garage. And my motion also includes the references to the tree commission requirements as set forth in the previous amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Bennick. So Mr. Bennick's motion to approve with the 2 conditions. One is the adherence to the sidewalk and street trees recommendations from the tree committee, as well as condition 2, that the applicant will submit revised plans denoting demonstrating a 2-bay garage versus the initially filed 3-bay garage. Do we have a second?
Seconded, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So motion is made by Mr. Bennick, seconded by Mr. Moore. Calling the roll, Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Swanton.
No.
Mr. Bennick.
Yes.
And Rob Champetti, I vote yes. That is 4 in the affirmative. Thank you. I had to take a moment. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the special permit is approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Thank you all, and thank you for everyone who is with their patience in attendance and for speaking in connection with the application. With that concluded, that concludes the public hearings of our Zoning Board of Appeals for the evening of July 27th, 2021. I will now close the public hearing section of our agenda and open the final segment, which is our business meeting. The first matter on our business meeting is the approval of the minutes of July 13, 2020. Do we have any amendments, modifications, changes, or revisions to the minutes by any member of the ZBA? And in the absence of that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
You FaceTiming me?
Who did this?
Blake?
Blake started it.
Yeah, it's still on.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes, or do we have any changes?
This is Mr. Delisle. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Delisle. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Motion's made and seconded. Calling the roll on the approval of the minutes, Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Delisle.
Yes.
Mr. Swanton.
I think I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. Mr. Bennick.
Yes.
And was I there? I believe, Andy, was I at 7:13? I can't even remember.
I had recalled you being there, but
yeah. Okay. So I vote yes. I suppose I could look at the minutes and find out. The motion carries. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. So, other updates from the chair. I have none at the moment, though there may be some coming. I believe we've also talked about migrating our meetings to either hybrid or in person. My inclination is to try to do this as soon as we're able to. As soon as we can, get some kind of reliable scheduling preference of the council chambers. And I believe Andy Port has been sort of the tip of the spear on some of that as well. Andy, any updates on any of that?
Just one note relative to the zoning update. So we're doing in sections, I think as we talked about before, trying to rewrite the whole ordinance at once and get everybody to agree on the language at one particular time. Is difficult. So we're doing it in phases. One question arose, and I think in the last week or so, from one of the board members about the fact that, just boiling it down in real simple terms, I know that we've been on here for a couple hours, but just real quick, the fact that I'm just going to throw up on the screen the language here, but Jennifer and I have talked about adding this particular language or something to its effect in the zoning ordinance, and something for you to think about and give us thoughts on if you have any. But the bottom line being that the zoning ordinance of Newburyport has a use table, a dimensional table, I should say, that doesn't cover all uses. So for instance, if a use is non-conforming, it's sometimes debatable as to what those dimensional requirements should be. The practice here has been to pick the most comparable use essentially, or refer to that in interpreting what the requirements are. And I think that came up in an email exchange with one of the board members about how a certain application was being handled. And that goes back to, prior to my time here, the zoning administrator, the building commissioner, having applied the ordinance that way. So essentially filling in a hole because there was not a dimensional requirement for certain uses in the table because they weren't allowed, for instance. Anyway, we talked about possibly adding some language like this to the ordinance that might help to clarify at least that there is the more restrictive requirement rather than having a situation in which something has a more lax allowance for dimensional requirements than something that's allowed in the district. But at any rate, we're looking to other changes and clean up in the ordinance. The one that I would like to do next is the, as this one that we have before the council, hopefully is moving forward these next 2 meetings for adoption, is the administrative section of the ordinance, because it was originally written for, there's other sections that we're working on, but that one in particular, I'd like to get updated because it was originally written only for the Zoning Board of Appeals, but in fact, the Planning Board also handles a good amount of the special permit hearings, in the city at this point. And there's a lot of old language in there, and it's not structured, I think, properly. So at any rate, we'll be cleaning up that section as well. And the planning board, some of the planning board members anyway, are giving us some input on what they'd like to see in plan requirements going forward, so we can update those provisions. And if you have any thoughts on that or anything else, we always welcome the suggestions or questions about a provision, and how we might sort of fill gaps or plug holes if we feel like there are any in there, like the 6 or 10 foot phrase that we've talked about of late. That's all.
Andy, quick question. This is Stephen Delisle. Are those draft sections, have they been, I don't think they've been circulated to us. Are they out there on the city's website and we should just go pick them off, or where are those located?
I'm sorry, when you say drafts, what drafts are you referring to?
Well, what you were just speaking of. I don't know because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so
I know that you had the one.
Yeah, just to make it as simple as possible, I'll just show you on the screen. So on the city's website, if you go to the planning and development page, which you see here, if you go to project updates, you'll see underneath the zoning rewrite project. On this page here, and we'll update this, but on this page here is an overview of some of the documents that we got from the consultant during the zoning rewrite project. Those drafts.
Right, but those aren't what you're using right now, though, are you? Those are.
No, what we're trying to do is no. What we're trying to do is the administrative section. We'd like to clean up. We are planning on pulling, for instance, from this one, relevant text that we thought was had some consensus. From the rewrite project, so we can bring forward those components. But you're right, we're not strictly abiding by these drafts as being definitive. But what we're trying to do is go section by section, because trying to do the whole ordinance at once and get everybody in consensus over one document of hundreds of pages, fell under its own weight. So what we're doing is we are pulling from the rewrite project that we worked on with the consultant, the relevant sections or provisions or clarifications that we think may be helpful for each section accordingly. But on the city's website is also information about the pending zoning amendments, the one zoning amendment for the council right now. That's a cleanup, about 17 pages.
Right, that's the mini review, right?
Yeah, that one, a new version of that will be posted shortly and will be coming out of the council's committee. They made a few tweaks at the last meeting, so there'll be a slightly updated version of that that we presume will be coming out on the council floor for adoption. And with that being brought forward, we'd like to roll into the next, with everybody's bandwidth, the next, package. So, like I said, what I'd like to focus on is the administrative section. that is out of date, but there's other pieces obviously that the folks want to update or focus on. We do have other amendments that, you know, have been discussed or at play. So there's a zoning amendment for the I-95, old I-95 roadbed proposal to allow renewable energy, or, you know, wind turbines essentially, or solar panels along that length where feasible, you know, from an environmental permitting point of view. But that's a relatively straightforward, I think, you know, singular issue versus cleanup of a whole section.
Yeah, is that thing somewhere?
Yeah, actually, let me just check and see if I can look at that here. It should be posted to our, so on the city's website, when you go to project updates, although it doesn't show on the pull down list here, when you go to project updates and you click on that, what you'll get is this listing here. So what Diane's done is there's a page that she's posted for that. What you have is the documents that are posted. What I'll check with her on is making sure that the most recent draft is there as well. I'm sorry, does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then just a quick question on that other section that you had put up before, just to make sure I understand it correctly.
Yeah, sure. Again, this was just for discussion purposes right now. You know, we obviously haven't vetted this for a consensus, but the idea is to plug a hole essentially in the ordinance, and you know, there has to be a policy level decision between the council, you know, planning board advice and anyone else about what that threshold should be and whether or not this is maybe too restrictive, you know, as applied. We can look through the dimensional table and have discussion about it, but the concern was just that the ordinance is sort of silent on how to deal with certain uses or in terms of their dimensional requirements.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that seems like a good plug for the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. Any further updates? Any further comments before we move to our elections? All right. So this is our annual elections of officers. I see that Bud is logged on, so that's great. It looks like we have a full board for purposes of the elections. And so with that, we just need to nominate the following positions: chair, vice chair, and secretary. And then we will have a vote on the elections, and we'll be good for another year.
I'll nominate Rob Chimpetti for chairman.
Greg Bennick, I'll second that motion.
I'll nominate Mark. Sorry about that.
Sorry, Stephen, I think you got stepped on.
Sorry.
So
yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. Actually, if we can do this, and certainly thank you for that the nomination, but if we can do this as a slate, it'll probably be more effective. So if someone wants to, you know, start to put out, you know, nominations, we can see sort of where the wind is blowing, but the slate should be for chair, vice chair, secretary, and we could just see if everyone's, you know, in agreement with keeping the offices as they are, or whether there's some new names. We'll just take that as it flies. But does anyone want to make a motion for a slate to try to consolidate the vote?
This is Mr. Delisle. I would nominate.
This is Bud Shagnon. I'd nominate Mark Moore for vice chair.
Okay, so we have a nomination of Mr. Moore for vice chair, and Mr. Delisle, you had gotten cut off as well.
I was going to make the same nomination, so I will just second Mr. Chagnon's nomination of Mr. Moore.
Okay, so as we and then do we have a nomination for secretary?
I will nominate Mr. Delisle.
Okay, so we have Mr. Delisle, and do we have a second?
We're doing a slate the long way.
We really are. So in my hearing, we have the nominations are Rob Champetti, chair, Mr. Moore, vice chair, and Mr. Delisle, secretary. Is there any member who is that? Let me just ask the members who made those nominations. Mr. Delisle, is that your slate?
I don't know if can I do that for myself. I mean, the top two would be my slate.
Yeah,
I don't.
That's true. Okay, so your slate are chair, Rob Champetti, chair, Mark Moore, vice chair, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Mr. Shannon, your slate was Rob Chiappetti chair, or was it? I didn't hear that part, but certainly I heard.
Yes, it would be Rob Ciampetti chair, Mark Moore vice chair, and Stephen Delisle secretary.
All right, very good, thank you. And Mr. Bennick, did you make a slate as well?
No, I did not. I was simply jumping the gun and
very
seconding
good.
the motion.
Okay. So we have a slate. It seems to be a consistent slate. Motion has been made and seconded on the nomination of Rob Ciampetti chair, Mark Moore vice chair, and Stephen Delisle secretary. The motion having been made and seconded, I will call the roll and just a yay or nay vote. Mr. Moore.
Yay.
Mr. Delisle.
Yay.
Mr. Swanton.
Yay.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes. Yay.
Thank you. Mr. Bennick.
Yes.
And Rob Ciampetti, I'll vote yes. That's a unanimous vote. The nomination of officers has passed, and so the officers for the next year will be Rob Ciampetti chair, Mark Moore vice chair, and Stephen Delisle secretary. My condolences to us all. So thank you all very much. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Very good. Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and have a great night. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
All right.